The unexpected joy in a tuberculosis ward. They were dying. In the 1950s, tuberculosis was still one of the deadliest diseases on the planet. It spread through the air, infecting millions, and once it reached the lungs, it was like a slow, suffocating death sentence. Doctors had little to offer besides bed rest and hope, and hospitals were overflowing with patients too weak to even sit up. But in one ward, something strange started happening. Some of these patients, who had been pale, frail, and wasting away, suddenly became happy. Not just better, euphoric. They were talking non-stop, laughing, singing in the hallways, and even dancing in their hospital gowns. It was unnatural. They should have been exhausted, drowning in fever and fatigue. Instead, they were wired, almost as if they had discovered some secret energy source. Doctors were baffled. Was the disease reversing itself? Were they witnessing a miracle? No, it was the medication. A new tuberculosis drug, one that had been designed to kill bacteria, was accidentally altering the chemistry of the brain. And in that moment, completely by accident, the first antidepressant in history was discovered. It was called iproniazid, and it was never supposed to exist. The journey to this discovery didn't begin in a psychiatric ward. It began on a battlefield. During World War II, scientists were racing to find better treatments for soldiers exposed to deadly infections. Among these treatments was a class of drugs called hydrazines, powerful chemicals that could kill bacteria, but also, quite dangerously, mess with human physiology in unexpected ways. By the late 1940s, researchers at Hoffmann-La Roche, one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world, started testing a hydrazine derivative called iproniazid to see if it could wipe out tuberculosis. The drug worked. Infected patients started improving. Their fevers dropped, their lungs cleared, and tuberculosis, this silent, merciless killer, was finally losing the fight. But then, something unexpected happened. Along with clearing up the infection, iproniazid was making patients feel incredible. Doctors noticed that even those who had been emotionally devastated by their illness, people who had been silent, withdrawn, hopeless, were suddenly chatty, energetic, and restless. Some were staying up for days, unable to sleep. Others were overwhelmingly optimistic, filled with uncontrollable joy, despite still being in a hospital bed. At first, researchers dismissed it as a temporary reaction, maybe even placebo, but then the reports kept coming. It wasn't just a few patients, it was dozens, hundreds, and the effect was so noticeable that doctors started calling it the psychic energizer. Word spread, and eventually one man took notice. Dr. Nathan Kline was a psychiatrist in New York, and at the time the field of psychiatry was brutal. If you were severely depressed in the 1950s, your options were grim. Therapy was in its infancy, and medications, there were none. If your depression was bad enough, you'd be given electroconvulsive therapy. And if that didn't work, a lobotomy. Psychiatric hospitals were full of people who had been left behind, deemed untreatable, locked away in asylums with no hope of recovery. But Kline wasn't convinced. He believed that depression wasn't just a psychological issue, that there had to be something happening inside the brain itself. So when he heard about the mood-altering effects of iproniazid in tuberculosis patients, he had a theory. What if this wasn't just a fluke? What if this drug could do the same thing for people with severe depression? Kline got to work. He tested iproniazid on psychiatric patients who had been deeply unresponsive for years, people who had been catatonic, hopeless, and completely withdrawn from the world. And the results? Nothing short of miraculous. Within weeks, patients who had been unable to function were suddenly engaged, alert, and motivated. They were talking, laughing, showing emotion again. For some, it was the first time in decades they had felt even a glimmer of happiness. The effect was undeniable. Kline had just discovered the first true antidepressant, and yet it almost never made it to market. There was just one problem. Iproniazid was not a safe drug. As more people started taking it, doctors realized that euphoria came with a cost. The drug didn't just lift moods, it messed with the body's ability to regulate blood pressure. Some patients on iproniazid developed hypertensive crises so severe that their blood pressure skyrocketed to dangerous levels. Others suffered severe liver damage. And by 1961, after multiple reports of fatal complications, the FDA pulled the drug from the market. The first antidepressant, the one discovered completely by accident, was gone. But by then, it was too late to erase what had been learned. Because even though iproniazid had been banned, psychiatrists now knew something revolutionary. Depression wasn't just a psychological condition. It had a biological component, one that could be treated with medication. And the race was on to find a better, safer alternative. In the years that followed, pharmaceutical companies scrambled to build on iproniazid's accidental discovery. They started developing new drugs based on its mechanism, first tricyclic antidepressants like imipramine, and then in the 1980s, SSRIs like Prozac, which would go on to reshape mental health treatment forever. Today, antidepressants are one of the most widely prescribed medications in the world. They've been credited with saving millions of lives, but they've also sparked decades of debate over their effectiveness, side effects, and the ethics of chemical solutions to mental illness. But the truth is, none of this was supposed to happen. Iproniazid wasn't created for depression. It wasn't designed to change psychiatry. It was an accident, a side effect, a tuberculosis drug that just happened to unlock something bigger than anyone expected. And whether you see antidepressants as a medical miracle or a pharmaceutical controversy, one thing is certain. Psychiatry was never the same again. If you want more mind-blowing stories about the hidden history of psychiatric medicine, hit that subscribe button and let's dive deeper into the pills that changed the world.